So it's really about discipline more than motivation, and forming habits and routines based on discipline. And it doesn't take much to get started. I tell everybody to start small. But it's not about motivation. Anybody can get motivated. You can go to a Tony Robbins seminar and get motivated, and that will probably last for a day or two, where you're really fired up and blah, blah, blah. Or you can go to the gym on January 1st, and maybe you listened to Tony Robbins and got fired up about fitness, and now you're on fire. And January 2nd, you're still on fire. And January 3rd, you're starting to become a little bit disillusioned. And January 4th, gosh, this is taking kind of, and the motivation is worn off. So it's really about writing down your goals, writing down your why, posting it, and then starting small.
This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. PJ, welcome to the show. I cannot tell you how cool it is to actually get to talk to you. You know, you're a pretty famous guy. And so when we got the opportunity to have you on the show, I was really excited for it. I think we're going to have a great conversation today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm equally excited. The topics on your past podcasts are right up my alley. So we had a lot to talk about, and it's going to be a really fun time.
Well, man, you know, we've spent a lot of time over the course of the last several months really honing in on some physical health and mental health. We've talked a little bit about self-improvement, how we can be the best versions of ourselves, all things that I think are within the scope of things that you talk about and really are an expert in. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do today, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. Well, I have a gym. It's called the XGYM, XGYM.com, and I've had it since 1998. And so it's been a nice long road, a lot of fun. And I am now the oldest gym in the Pacific Northwest as far as, you know, personal training studios and small group training goes. And it's mainly because I'm stubborn. And so I think, you know, any entrepreneur that makes it past that first year or so, where 90% fail, has to be pretty stubborn, because you know, we're all
That's
optimists. Fair. Yeah. And so we do napkin math, and then we jump into this business, and then we think it's going to turn out even better than our napkin math. And then it's like, oh, it's not turning out like that at all, but I'm going to make it work. And so then we just shift into first gear and grind it out. And it's been great now. You know, we've expanded and moved, and lots of things have happened with us. And now we do a lot of online training, and we do have an app, and we have a brain type test, and there's a lot of different ways we help people now. But it's been a really fun, long journey that has taught me a lot of lessons and a lot of ups and downs. But, you know, that's what makes you better and stronger.
Yeah, you know, you're so right about that first year in that time period, right? So, you know, for most of the listeners, know that I am part of a large multi-unit practice, and that practice has grown really over the course of 20 years or so. Podcasting, however, is relatively still new for me, and it takes some dedication and some time, and it's like building your own business when you're doing podcasting. And that first year of, man, I don't even know if I'm doing this right, and how many people are supposed to listen to this thing. I mean, these are all the things that you learn as you're going along. And so I identify with that very, very readily.
Oh, yeah.
And,
people don't realize, you know, they look at people like Howard Schultz of Starbucks, and they just assume he was an overnight billionaire. But they don't know that he had one coffee shop for 15 years before, you know, anything took off. And they don't realize that the Beatles played in bars for 14 years before they, you know, and stuff like that. They don't realize the background stuff, but, you know, that's real.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's a really good point. People pick up where they actually meet the person, right? So,
Hmm.
when people met the Beatles, most people were seeing them for the first time when they
Hmm.
were big, right?
Hmm.
And so all that stuff before doesn't
Yeah.
matter as much to them as it did to the Beatles
Right.
themselves. So you made it actually very modest. You have a gym. So talk about XGym a little bit, because I think you're doing some things that are a little bit different than what people typically think about when it comes to fitness and what they do when they work out.
Right.
And so I think it's very interesting kind of to talk about those differences.
It's very different. So we have a workout that takes 21 minutes and it's twice a week. And that 42 minutes a week is equivalent to about 7 hours of traditional training. And it's very non-traditional. So when people think of traditional training, they think of sets and reps like people are doing at 24-hour fitness, or they think of, kipping pull-ups and ballistic motions with heavy weights like people are doing at CrossFit. And both of those things are great. And, that's perfect for some people. But
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted to create is a niche for a certain kind of person, the very busy person who either doesn't have time to work out, or they just don't want to spend time working out, but they still want the results of somebody that works out for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I started right when I graduated college. I got my degree in exercise science from SPU, Seattle Pacific University. And then I started training people out of their homes. And so I was in-home personal trainer driving around different people's homes. And of course, they're rich people with big houses and home gyms and all that. And so it was fun to be able to test my theories and experiment on them. And they knew they were
Ah,
guinea pigs
yeah.
because I wanted to create a system that saves time, is safer. So, less injuries, zero if possible. And then also creates muscle definition and strength, functional strength, and endurance. So people look and feel fit, and they really are fit, without creating muscle bulk.
Mm.
So we're not a bodybuilding gym. If people want to get jacked, they go somewhere else. But if they want to get defined, look and feel fit, and be fit functionally especially, they come to us. And they save a bunch of time. And
Mm.
it's safer, so they're not getting injured all the time, like traditional training with ballistic reps. And so it took me about 10 years with them as my guinea pigs to develop my 7 methods and 30 splinter techniques to create this system. And then I opened the X Gym in 98. And then we're continuing to develop and improve. We're always experimenting. We're a gym and a lab. So we're always experimenting with stuff and biohacking everything, especially anti-aging. And because what it turns out is the busy people are in the age group of 40 to 70 years old. So because busy people come to us, that's our biggest part of our bell curve. And
Mm.
so we're continuing to cater to that age group. We have people in their 20s and we have people in their 90s, but the biggest part is 40 to 70. And so we continue experimenting to, make the program better for our main base. And that's who it is.
You said a couple of things that I think we should go back and talk a little bit more about. One of them is thinking about the time difference between what traditional weightlifting or conditioning would absorb in the schedule versus the 21 minutes twice a week
Mhm.
that your program has. And one of the barriers for a lot of people when they're thinking about fitness is trying to find the time that they want to devote to it,
Yep.
right? And it's always a balance, but there's lots of things during the day that are not necessarily fitness that
Yeah.
people both want and need to do.
Right.
And so the end result is folks kind of pick and choose. These are the things I've got time for. These are the things I don't have time for. And fitness often falls into that I don't have time bucket.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it feels like this is an opportunity to kind of get rid of that bucket. So how is it possible for you to get the same amount of work done in such a short time?
It's all about time under tension and getting to complete muscle fatigue with time under tension as the tool to get there. So what I mean by time under tension is imagine doing a squat motion that the rep takes 14 seconds. So it's 7 seconds going down. And then there's a pause at the bottom part because that's the hardest part, the best part of the range. And then it takes 7 seconds to come up, but you're only coming up 2/3 of the way up. So you don't get up all the way. You stop while there's still contraction on the muscle. And you continue doing that for 2 minutes. And then at the end of that 2 minutes, then there's extra splinter techniques that we'll do. Maybe it's knees close, knees far. Maybe it's alternate toe taps. It depends on the person. Maybe it's just a weight shift right to left or forward and back. And keep them going for 3 to 3 minutes. So it's kind of like doing Tai Chi, but with weights, light weights, because you can't do heavy weights with my methodology because it's so much time under tension. And then at the end, with the help of time and with the help of our splinter techniques, you get to complete muscle fatigue or failure, where you just can't do it. You just can't go on. And then you need help with some of the splinters that we have to keep going, to get more time under tension and more fatigue. And so the intensity is crazy, but because we're not doing fast, ballistic, snappy reps with heavy weights, it's also really safe. So we can get to that same level of failure intensity, but without the danger along the way.
That's remarkable to kind of think about, because I think as I think about more traditional weightlifting, let's think about reps and sets versus say something that's more dynamic like CrossFit. The thought is similar in that you're looking for fatigue and ultimately within 1 or 2 reps of failure to get you to the goal of hypertrophy, right? Yeah. And so you think more about added weight, longer ranges of motion, but you don't always think about the fact that at the end of the range of motion, there's very little actual tension left, right? Because you're either at the end, you're back at the resting spot for just a few fractions of a second.
Yeah.
And so when people are interested or you're working with people, how do you talk about the differences between the hypertrophy response and the fitness response that this seems like it gets? Because it doesn't seem like they would be the same.
Yeah, they're not. So what a lot of people don't realize is traditional training, which is sets and reps, was invented back in 1891 by Eugene Sandow. He was a famous European strongman, came to the U.S. and made a fortune doing strongman competitions and just shows, like circus shows, because he was super strong. He was also really jacked. And he wasn't one of those big, obese, heavy strongmen that did also feats of strength back then. He was ripped and jacked. And so he was getting all the chicks. And men back in the late 1800s were skinny. Obesity wasn't a problem back then, but they wanted to be jacked like Eugene. And so they kept trying to talk him into telling them how he got that way, but he didn't want to because he didn't want other people competing with him. He wanted to keep it a secret. So that was a secret sauce. But they finally bribed him into it. And they said, well, you could sell it and make a bunch of money. So then he started selling his methodology, which was sets and reps. And that's when it was born. And that's what most people are still doing because they don't know that there's anything different than that. And there kind of isn't. And so they will go to the gym on January 1st and, crowd the gym doing Eugene's methods because that's all they know. And they'll either get bored because it takes a really long time because Eugene's methods are perfect for bodybuilders and they should do that. But it takes so much time because there's multiple sets. You're doing 8 to 12 reps and then you're resting a couple minutes and then you're doing another set. You end up doing 5 sets of a certain exercise with rests in between. Just one exercise can take 10 minutes. And so, or more if you're a professional bodybuilder that's literally working out all day, every day. And so ours is one set and it's to complete muscle failure. And research shows that's all you need as long as it's true failure. But we're also doing time under tension, which is endurance. So a normal traditional set takes about 10 seconds, and then you rest for a couple of minutes. So you're getting good strength benefits from that, but you're getting no endurance from that. And you're not even getting a very, very high heart rate spike because it's not long enough to do that. But when you're doing a 3-minute set, like we're doing, of constant contraction with no rests at all, now we're talking about time under tension where the heart rate spikes because of the time and the intensity and the effort. And because of the constant contraction with no rests in between each contraction, which there's 2 ways traditional training rests. There's a rest between every contraction because momentum at the top gives you a rest because you're going so fast. And all the muscle cell needs is a quarter second to refuel. So they're refueling between every rep, and then they're resting 2 minutes or more between every set. And so that's why it's good for strength, but lousy for endurance. But if you're constantly contracting, it's good for endurance. And at the end, when we fail, it's good for strength. So that's how we get both.
I see.
Now, what the muscle cell is trying to do is it will get bigger because it wants more tensile strength if it's a strength experience for the muscle cell. But if it's an endurance experience for the muscle cell wants to get smaller to bring the capillaries closer to the nucleus to be more efficient for endurance stuff. So since we're doing both, the muscle does neither. It doesn't get bigger in circumference and it doesn't get smaller in circumference, and it just gets denser. And so it's still putting down the same proteins that a bodybuilder would, but in a smaller space. So the muscles become way more toned, and people are burning fat because they're adding muscle mass as far as weight goes without adding muscle girth. So our people get super dense muscles. So it's not the big, huge, puffy muscles like a bodybuilder. It's defined, dense muscles like a fitness person. But they're as strong as somebody that's bigger. So that our people are always stronger than they look, but they just look fit. They don't look like they can lift a ton, but they just look fit, like they could go forever, and also strong because of the tone and the definition. But then when they are asked to lift a bunch, they can.
That sounds like the best of all worlds, right? Not just both, all. In that, because, and it goes back to you mentioned functional fitness, and that really does seem like that's a highly functional way to exist. If you've got endurance or stamina, you've got strength to go along with it, you're not carrying a lot of extra bulk to get there, then it means that you should be able to do most real things in life and do them pretty well.
Right. Yeah. And CrossFit is kind of in between traditional and us because you can get some pretty good size at CrossFit. And I mean, you look at the CrossFit games, for instance, and the men and women, for that matter, look like lightweight bodybuilders. I mean, they're pretty darn jacked, but they don't look like a pro heavyweight bodybuilder. And so what we look like is our people look like the cover of Men's Fitness instead of the cover of Flex. And so that's the difference. But our people are as strong as a CrossFitter without having to put in all the time that CrossFitters do. But the other advantage and another reason that CrossFit is kind of in the middle is CrossFit is more functional. If you're talking about classic bodybuilding exercises, that's not functional at all. And so they're actually detraining their nervous system and becoming less coordinated because it's a lot of isolation exercises where the machine is helping you do the range of motion and control everything, and lots of sets and reps and lots of time. So if you watch a pro bodybuilder do any sport he's never done before, he's a complete oaf, okay? Because he's detrained his nerves all day. I'm not trying to diss anybody. I'm just stating fact. A CrossFitter is going to be able to pick up sports pretty easy because that's a lot more functional. They're doing a lot of free motion stuff. They don't use machines. They're using free weights and their own body and all that kind of stuff, which is very functional. But because it's doing a lot of ballistic motions, snappy motions, it can be dangerous. And so ours is very functional. We're not using machines. We're using body weight stuff, elastic resistance, light weights, and a lot of our own inventions that we've come up with since '98. And so it's functional like CrossFit, but it's a lot safer and it takes way less time and a lot more endurance along with the functional fitness and then strength because of the complete muscle fatigue.
So if I were then to walk into an X gym, how would it look compared to, say, the traditional membership gym, as far as equipment or the types of things that would be there?
It has a lot of our own inventions, and you would also see a bunch of ropes hanging from the ceiling that have handles on them because we do a lot of suspension training. So you're probably familiar with the TRX system that has the straps and the adjustment buckles and handles and loops and things for hands and feet and doing body suspension training things. Ours are an innovation on that. They're made out of a climbing rope, and instead of buckles to adjust the height of the handles, they just have prusik knots that are tied to, which is a climbing knot, which is tied to the handles and the loops that we use for hands and feet. So the climbing rope has a little bit of give to it because it's a little stretchy, and then the handles are a lot more functional for hands and feet. And the prusik knots make it really easy to slide it up and down the rope really quick for different height adjustments. So it's kind of the same. It's just, better system for the handles and then the rope and all that stuff adds layers of safety because of the elastic nature that just make it more safer and more functional. And then, so that's one example. Another example is you'll see our QuadraSlides on the wall that are padded. It's a curved pad that follows the exact curve of your spine. So you stand back against that and you put your feet out in front away from the wall. So they're a little bit out in front. And then you are slowly sliding up and down the wall, or whatever method that we're using, because only one of our methods is super slow motion. But so you're controlling motion, no matter the method, on that, and it's on a linear bearing. So it does help guide you so you don't fall over right to left. But it's essentially a closed chain exercise, but now you're getting your quads and your glutes with our time under tension, just like you would in a squat, but without the danger of the knee part and without the danger of the low back part, because you don't have a big heavy barbell on your neck leaning forward with all that weight. So it just takes all the danger out of it, but still gets the quads and the glutes in the same way. And that's just two examples. Cool. We also have an extreme machine that's my favorite, and that's where it starts with X, of course. Yeah, XGYM X. So X, and then people scream when they use it. So we called it the Extreme machine instead of extreme. And then what that is a standard cable machine with the arms that go out where you can take them up and down, or you can forward and back, and the cable comes out of that, so you can do lots of different exercise on it. But instead of a weight stack in the machine, it's an electric winch, and the trainer has the remote on the winch to control the direction and the speed.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so the client is just pulling as hard as they can. They don't have to think about anything but pulling as hard as they can, and the trainer's in control of the winch. So if the form is crappy, they just stop. And they go, all right, stop, keep pulling, but stop. Now we're going to correct your spine or whatever it is that you're doing wrong. And then we can keep going. And so then because it's necessarily 100% contraction 100% of the time with no easy part in the range, that's a kind of a hack on top of our hack, where it takes like a minute and a half to get to complete muscle failure. And it feels like 10 sets of traditional training, whatever exercise you're doing.
Man, that first of all, I don't know that I want to do that machine. Part of me wants to do it because, it's called the screen machine. The other part's like, I don't know about doing this. So that's pretty amazing. It's all really a very interesting concept, and it feels like you've taken a combination of real world experience and kind of the educational knowledge that you had and kind of put
Uh-huh.
those things together
Yeah.
into inventing not only a concept, but how ways to fulfill that invention, right?
Yeah.
And is that something that just appeals to you, just kind of thinking differently out of the box? Are you a curious kind of guy?
Yes. Yes. I am. I got in a lot of trouble in school because I asked way too many questions. But I've always been curious and I've always been super skeptical. So I don't believe anybody, including myself. And I just question everything and then want to come up with something better and, be a disruptor, but in a very scientific way.
Yeah.
Because, and the stuff that we do at XGym, the reason it took 10 years to develop my methods because of the scientific process that I would do it. I'd come up with a great idea. I think it was the best idea in the whole world because I'm an optimist entrepreneur, so that's how we think. So I come up with some idea and then I try it on myself first, and then if it works on me, but it usually doesn't. I mean, 90% of the ideas that I come up with that I think are just going to change the world are horrible ideas because when I try it myself and it fails, or I try it myself and it works, but it doesn't work on friends and family because they're the next phase.
Got it.
Or if it passes that phase and then it works on my trainers, great. But sometimes it fails in that phase. And then the next phase is longtime members that have been with me for a really long time that like doing new stuff. And they know we're kind of the lab and they think it's fun. And it is. And so then if it makes it through all of those layers, then we decide, is it better than what we have? Could it replace one of our methods or splinter techniques? Or is it the same? And then if it's the same but more fun, then yeah, it's better. So then we'll kick one out and put one in. So we're constantly changing and improving. But as we're changing, it's only if it's an improvement. So we look different than we did in 1998. The gym looks different and we do things differently, but it's just better. And in another 20 years, I don't know what it'll look like, but it's going to be better and it's going to be really cool.
That's pretty awesome. But you didn't start out though in exercise. You started, I think, in thinking about psychology,
Yeah,
right?
psych. Yeah.
And so what made the change? Like, how did you go from thinking about how people think about things to physically also helping those people?
Yeah, I started SPU as a psych major thinking I was going to become a psychologist and do counseling and all that kind of stuff because, I had a knack for it just with my friends and other people all through school. And it was fun for me. But I also thought fitness was really fun. I started that in my freshman year of high school because I was a skinny guy and I didn't want to be skinny anymore. And so that fixed it. And I just really liked working out. And so I had two passions. And then as I was doing all the psychology classes, it started to dawn on me that maybe I don't want to sit around and listen to people's problems all day. And I'm sure that I would make more money as a psychologist than a fitness trainer, but I think I'd be happier as a fitness trainer. And so I switched over my senior year, which kept me there an extra year, but it's okay. And then I graduated with exercise science, but have a lot of psychology training under my belt. And health and fitness is huge into psychology. And so I still continued research and interest in psychology and used it in my training with my clients and guinea pigs. So there's a lot of psychology built into this, including coaching people through getting to complete muscle fatigue because it's hard. So coping mechanisms and things like that, we have a lot of those that we do. And even over the years, I developed my own brain type test to find out which brain type my people are. And then I can now talk to them in their language based on their brain wiring. Because the biggest problem you see is traditional trainers out there giving their clients nutrition or health advice that doesn't work for them, but it works for the trainer. The trainer has found out what works for them kind of by accident over time, trying different things. And they assume now that all that stuff is going to work for everybody else. So they give that advice to their client, and there's different brain types. So there's an 80% chance their client is going to come back to them and say, hey, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't do what you told me to do. Then the trainer says, well, just suck it up and have more willpower. But the problem is it didn't make sense to the client's brain.
Yeah.
And so over the years, I wanted to hack into that. And it took me 5 years of, intensive study and trial and error with, friends and family, and same process. But then I came up with the brain type test, where I can figure out which of the 16 brain types someone is. And then I can give them advice customed to their wiring that will make sense to them, and advice and tips and tricks and hacks and brain training techniques to actually change their brain and rewire it based on what's going to work for their unique brain wiring.
That's absolutely amazing, because I don't think we talk enough about that specific point.
Yeah.
In that you're exactly right. People will often ask a trainer or a fitness influencer, what should I do? Right. And they come back with these things that make some sense, right? Like it's based on some science or even math, calories in, calories out, do this, do that.
Right.
And people take that advice away and they're unsuccessful, and they think, this has got to be my fault, because look at this person. I want to be like this person. This is what they do. Yeah. They told me what to do. I can't do it. Yeah. Right. And you mentioned it earlier, the concept of boredom, which is something that really does happen to people during their workout phases. And so understanding brain types, that just seems like a really big unlock for people to get over this hump that is sometimes very difficult for them.
Right. It's huge. And it's really the only way to get over the hump, because there's those speed bumps and getting over humps and even walls and hurdles they're struggling, and they don't know why they're struggling. And they say, they then start asking questions. Gosh, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. It's just that doesn't make sense for you, and you shouldn't do that. There's, you can go on YouTube and you can Google or YouTube search something, what's the best way to eat, and what's the best way to burn visceral fat, something like this, even a specific question like that. And you're going to get the whole range gamut. You're going to get so many people saying different things. And there's going to be a common thread or two, but there's going to be vastly different advice between people. And well, how do I figure out how do I disseminate all this information? How do I figure out what's really going to work for me? Well, that's what my brain type test is for. So it boils it down, and it saves a whole bunch of time to figure out their wiring, and then specifically what's going to make sense to them as far as goals, motivation, nutrition, hurdles, roadblocks, overcoming, issues that may make them quit or give up, and all that kind of stuff.
I think that this is one of those things that is just extremely interesting to me in particular, because, you hear this debate sometimes around motivation versus consistency, right?
Yeah.
And some of that is setting a goal and looking to achieve that goal. Some of it is the journey to get to the goal, and you're kind of thinking about establishing lifestyle habits kind of versus doing something because you think it's going to achieve the thing you want, right? And so when you start to think about all of those things, particularly the motivation versus consistency piece, like how do you think about it, and how do you start to have those discussions? Because a lot of people, I would imagine, as they're starting their journey, have to try to establish real life, real reasons that they're going to continue to train.
Yeah. So it's really about discipline more than motivation, and forming habits and routines based on discipline. And it doesn't take much to get started. I tell everybody to start small, but it's not about motivation. Anybody can get motivated. You can go to a Tony Robbins seminar and get motivated. And that will probably last for a day or two where you're really fired up and blah, blah, blah. Or you can go to the gym on January 1st and maybe you listened to Tony Robbins and got fired up about fitness and now you're on fire. And January 2nd, you're still on fire. And January 3rd, you're starting to become a little bit disillusioned. And January 4th, gosh, this is taking kind of, and the motivation is worn off. So it's really about writing down your goals, writing down your why, posting it, and then starting small. So if somebody says, well, I want to get fit, why? Well, I want to look better. Why? Well, because, I want to be more attractive to dating or to my wife. Why? And then you keep asking why until you ran out of answers, and there's your why. So you post that, and then you start by walking around your house. And you make that a daily habit. No exceptions. You just do it because that's what discipline is. But it's easy to walk around your house every day. And even if it's pouring down rain, you just take an umbrella and you walk around your house. And then when that gets easy and boring, you walk around the block and you do it every single day. And pretty soon, now it's become routine, like brushing your teeth. And it's part of that, but it's the discipline, starting with the small things that are easy to have discipline with, and just let it grow at your own pace until pretty soon you're doing something every day. And lo and behold, look at me, I'm fit, and so it's the discipline that's the most important thing.
So it's sometimes hard for people who have multiple interests to actually have really good discipline, right? Yeah. And so, as a fellow curious human being, we can get very distracted in learning new things, right? Yeah. But it can also be part of that same personality that says, well, now I've learned this thing, let me apply it. And that drives the discipline piece. But you've done a lot of things that are not just the fitness aspect, right? So you're a pilot, right? I've got to ask you about tower running, by the way, because I don't know exactly what that entails, but it sounds fascinating. Yeah. But and so I guess the point is I think we can all conceptualize what it takes or what discipline is. I think it's much more difficult to actualize discipline without the proper checks and balances. I love writing the why because that gives you something that's physical that you can refer to drive you back to why you're doing the thing. And so then it's not the thing, it's to get to the reason you're doing it, which is really underlying how you get there.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's just as far as the other stuff goes, like the private pilot part, I did that as a brain training exercise because I pick a hard thing every year that's really good for my brain. I love that. It needs to be fun, but it needs to be hard, and it has to be outside my field of expertise. So I can't pick a new brain training thing that has anything to do with fitness, nutrition, brain health, all that kind of stuff where I'm studying and learning something new within those fields. It has to be something way outside. And so my dad was a private pilot, and I already flew with him some, and that was really fun. So I knew I'd have fun doing it, but it's hard. There's textbooks and the studying, and there's ground school, and there's the hours in the air, and there's the soloing, and there's the navigation, and there's the instruments, and there's tons of stuff to learn that I really didn't know. And that's good for your brain to do that. And especially when it gets really hard and you're on the verge of quitting because you're like, oh, this is so hard. That is actually where the benefits to the brain start. But people quit at that point because it's too hard. And so gutting it out, pushing through, but most importantly, realizing, okay, I'm doing this for my brain. And here's the point that PJ said the benefits start. So I'm just going to keep going because I'm doing this for my brain. And that was one of my yearly, that's just one of the ones that I picked. And then since then, just of course, recreational flying, single engine Cessna kind of stuff. And, but yeah, that was one of my brain training techniques to make my brain healthier.
I absolutely love that. And so I do things that are very similar. So anyone who knows me in my real personal life knows that I don't do anything without really doing the thing. Right.
Yeah.
So I want to learn all the stuff about it.
Yep.
I want to become like an expert in it. And you're right. Like you pick that thing and sometimes it gets really hard because you're thinking of all the things that you've got to learn around it. But then when you master it, you've mastered it and now you can do a new thing.
Yes.
And so I totally appreciate that you do that.
Yes.
That and brain health is one of those things where I think people take brain health for granted until they've actually got brain health symptoms themselves, or they have a loved one that does, right? And so keeping yourself mentally sharp is one of those things that is extremely important. And we didn't talk about biohacking, but there's a lot of research out there about just this topic and like some of the things that are maybe important or influential to continued brain health. I mean, we're hearing a lot now about creatine and the amount of creatine that could be a good amount to use in order to keep brain health where it should be. But talk to me a little bit about, since we were talking about your clients, are there things that you recommend for them to be thinking about in that 40 to 70 year range, physically or for their brain health that you think are good ideas?
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, and I have a post on it. If people go to xgym.com and just type in the word dementia, then they will come to the page where, well, there's a couple posts, but the one about Alzheimer's, because my mom came down with early onset Alzheimer's, and it was in the year 2000 when she was diagnosed. And so back then we didn't really know enough to help people with Alzheimer's, and so she passed in 2005. But
sorry for your loss.
Thanks. But I never stopped studying it, and since then I've learned that it can not only be slowed down but stopped and even prevented or reversed. And so it's amazing how fast the knowledge has improved. And there's, dozens of things that you can do to reverse it and prevent it. And I boiled it down to my top 5.
Okay.
For people to be able, just to make it simple. And the first one is oxygen to the brain. So that is important because oxygen is amazing for brain health. And it's the number one thing, far and away, way better. It's number 2 is a distant second. Number 2 is nutrition. Of course, you got to eat right and do the right kind of foods and omega-3s and all that kind of stuff. And then sleep. You got to get good sleep and quality sleep and enough sleep. And then relationships, really good quality, close relationships are huge. And then learning new things. So those are the top 5, but that's basically what I tell people, is to make sure that you're doing at least these 5 things and really being really diligent. And then people who are caregivers to somebody with Alzheimer's, then it's important to help them with these things, or any kind of dementia, because all 5 of these works for any kind of dementia. And they're very different, but only in the fact that people with Alzheimer's tend to be more resistant to change. So they're harder to help and to get them to with new habits and stuff. And the people with just age-related dementia are much more open to change. So they're a little easier to work with, but everybody, it's doable for everybody. And those are the things that I typically recommend, because a lot of people do ask, they don't have dementia, but they don't want to get it. And so, what do I do? Well, here's a post. Let's start with these 5 things.
Well, I will try to link directly to that from the blog post in the description of the episode, so people can actually take a peek at that.
Yeah.
So now my curiosity is around this tower running thing.
Yeah.
So can you explain what tower running is? And from what I understand, you're like a big deal, like a tower running champ when it comes it comes to this.
Well, yeah. So I did tower running competitively for a decade. And
Wow.
in that time, I was in the top five or the top 10 for 5 of those 10 years, top 10 in the US. And because I was able to biohack and exercise hack and method hack how to do it most efficiently, as an exercise scientist, it was easy for me. And so I wasn't doing it like everybody else was doing, and I wasn't training like everybody else, and it just got more efficient. And so I got pretty good at it. And it's essentially just running up the inside stairwells of skyscrapers. So, Willis Tower is 103 floors, and that's the tallest one around here in the US. And that is, accessible for a tower run. And then down to short ones like 20 floors, and those are sprints. And you get points for, how you do in these different races and how many races you do. Just kind of like any other sport, you have to be involved and be doing it a lot to be on the leaderboards. And then, so I would be, top 5 most of the races that I was
That's
doing.
amazing.
And doing as many as I could, and hacking technique a lot. So, the tower running sport is full of amateurs. We don't get paid to do it. We actually pay to do it. It's a very expensive sport to do because you're traveling and there's entry fees and all that stuff. And it's not, people haven't really heard of it. We tell people it's the hardest sport you never heard of because it's super hard, but it's not famous enough to get sponsors and things like that. So it's super expensive. So there's no such thing as a professional tower runner. So because it's an amateur sport, everybody's really nice. Because, once it's a professional sport and there's money involved, then people get nasty and competitive and all. But people are nice. So we're sharing, techniques and stories and tips and tricks and stuff like that, and helping each other get better and encouraging each other on. So it's a super fun sport. And
wow.
Yeah.
I've never heard of tower running, but do you know that I travel a lot for work. I'm on the road quite a bit, and my backup plan is always to climb the stairwells in hotels.
Yep.
So, if you're in a 50-story hotel, you've got a very nice stairwell that you can climb. And so I will do that if I can't do anything else. So who knew there were people who were paying money to do that very fast? So.
Yes, exactly. And another reason I chose it is because not just for the intensity and how hard it is, but also because how safe it is on the knees. Because when you're going up, it's super low impact.
Yeah.
When you're going down, it's high impact. But when you're doing tower running, you actually take the elevator down. So you're only up with this sport. So it's a very low impact sport, very safe, but very hard. And so just pro tip for you, when you're doing these, take the elevator to the highest floor of the hotel that you can access. Then you go to the stair. First of all, you pick the stairwell you want to climb up. So you go down and you find maybe it's on your floor, or maybe it's down at the bottom. Pick an accessible stairwell and notice what number it says on the wall, which stairwell it is. Then take the elevator to the top and then go find that stairwell. And then it's best if you have someone on the other side to make sure it doesn't close and lock shut. But then, or if it does, if you don't have somebody, just open the door, get inside the stairwell and see if the knob works. Because sometimes the stairwells will lock shut.
Yes.
And then if it does, great, you can get out. If it doesn't, then you take some masking, or you take some duct tape and you tape it open, and then you take the elevator back down. And now you get to go up, and you can go out that door and take the elevator down as many times up, elevator down as you want, which is amazing workout without the impact on your joints.
I love it. I love it. So, I really am interested in just how you were able to go from the one gym with a client list to more than one gym and growing a client list, because it sounds like you have an amazing technique, right? And but there's a lot of things along the way that drive you from experimenting with people in their home gyms to having a gym to having more than one gym and hundreds of people doing the program. Are there things that that happened along the way that were kind of key moments that you could share?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was up to 3 gyms, and that was great. But then life drama, divorce, splitting up the gyms, all that kind of stuff. And then one of the gyms failed. And then my 2 gyms were going great. And then the Seattle gym in 2018, the Seattle gym we were up on our lease again to renew our lease. Because gym had been open since, I guess, 2003. And it was doing great and everything. But Seattle City Council at the time was essentially communist. And so they were making it really hard for businesses to be in Seattle. And so there was this mass exodus of businesses leaving and just moving out of Seattle and getting the heck out. And so I thought, well, that might actually be kind of nice. It sounds nice to not be here anymore. And so then, I could just downsize to just the Kirkland gym. And so I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm not adverse to risk, but my wife is. She's not an entrepreneur. And so I figured, well, because I thought this seemed inspired. It's like God was telling me to do this. And so I said, well, to test this out, I'm going to ask Bev. And I'm going to take this idea to her. So, hey, Bev, I'm thinking about shutting down the West Seattle gym. And I was expecting her to say, well, that's crazy because, it's doing so well. And why would you do that? But I had a backup plan to do online training because we've been doing that since 2017. And so my plan was to shut the gym down, convert everybody over to online, continue to train them. I knew most people wouldn't probably go because that's weird. And at 2018, it wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody was really doing it. They knew we were doing it, but so I knew I'd lose some, but then also there goes all the overhead. And so her response was, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And so I was shocked. And so I go, well, this must be divine. And so then I shut it down in 2018. A lot of people switched over to online. And then 2019 came around. What's this COVID thing? And then 2020 rolled around. All the lockdowns, the West Seattle Bridge shut down. So then everybody that told me I was crazy for closing the West Seattle gym, now we're calling me up and saying, you're a genius. Are you a prophet? And
wow.
I said, well, no, I'm actually not that smart. But, God had my back and he knew what was coming. So that's what happened. That's how it happened. And then, so that's how we have such a huge online arm of our business, which is like another gym. And we have an app, a worldwide app that people use. So that's like another gym. And then we have our brain type tests. So there's lots of different ways to help people. So we're still helping the same amount of people, but just within the Kirkland gym and then all the other stuff.
That's incredible. And so, PJ, if people have listened to this and they're kind of wondering, how do I learn more? How do I get in contact with XGYM or learn more about PJ? How would they do that?
They would go to xgym.com, XGYM.com. And then if they're interested in the brain type test, then that would be braintype.me. Braintype.me. And that's really it, just those 2 things, because then all, the social links are on xgym.com. And so it's easy to find out, how to get in contact and all that stuff.
That's awesome. And you actually made it easy on me because sometimes the list of things that I have to link is really, really big. So I can actually point people to you fairly easily now. Yeah.
And they'll also see my book, on xgym.com. So if they wanted to get that too.
That's awesome. I was going to ask you about that because I know you've co-authored several books. You have your book is available. I saw links for it on Amazon. So we'll make sure we get that stuff in there too. But I have to say, I've really enjoyed having the conversation with you. It's been fantastic. I've learned
Same.
a lot of stuff, and it's actually kind of cool to talk to someone who has that whole problem I have about having to find something new and get really good at that new thing,
Yep.
master it, and then
Yep.
go look for something else to do. I love that because it's great for me, and I try to inspire other people to do it. And so it's just wonderful that you do too.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. And I look forward to just following your growth and success and,
Yeah.
and learning more about you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I had a blast talking with you.
If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff. So go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.